The mining outpost on Kepler 442b was a small place, forgotten by most of humanity. It sat between rust-colored mountains on a world that nobody cared about except for the 73 people who lived there. They worked hard, extracting rare minerals from deep underground, counting the days until they could go home to Earth. Commander Laura Bennett had run this outpost for 3 years. She was a calm woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too many long shifts. She knew every person under her command by name. She knew their families, their dreams, their complaints about the food in the cafeteria. These were her people, and she took care of them. The day everything changed started like any other. The morning crew went down into the mines. The night crew came up to sleep. Children went to the small schoolroom where a retired teacher named Carol taught them math and science. Life moved in its quiet rhythm, the same as it had for years. Danny Marsh sat at his communication station, bored and tired. He was 24 years old, fresh from training on Earth, assigned to this remote outpost as his first real job. He spent most of his shifts watching empty space on his screens, waiting for supply ships that came once every few months. When the first contact appeared on his sensors, he thought it was a glitch. Then 2 more appeared. Then 10. Then 50. Danny's hands started shaking as he counted the ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They were not human ships. The design was wrong. All curves and angles that made no sense to human eyes. He had studied alien vessels in his training, and he recognized these ones immediately. Velthari warships. The Velthari Dominion was an ancient empire that had existed for 10,000 years. They controlled hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Humans had encountered them a few decades ago, during the early days of Earth's expansion into space. The aliens had looked at humanity the way a person looks at an insect, with mild disgust and no interest. There had never been conflict between the two species. The Velthari simply ignored humanity, considering them too primitive to bother with. Until now. Danny sent an emergency signal to Earth. His voice cracked as he spoke into the microphone, trying to explain what he was seeing. 53 warships in orbit. No communication. No warning. Just silent death hanging in the sky above them. Laura reached the command center as the first. Bombs fell. The outpost shields were not military grade. They were designed to stop small meteors and space debris, not weapons of war. They failed in less than 2 minutes, overloaded by energy that turned the night sky into blinding white fire. The ground shook so hard that Laura fell to her knees. Alarms screamed from every speaker in the building. Lights flickered and died, replaced by red emergency lighting that made everything look like it was covered in blood. She grabbed Danny by the arm and pulled him toward the door. There was only one place they could go now. The underground bunker, built into the mountain itself, was their only chance of survival. People ran through the corridors in panic. Some of them were crying. Some were screaming names, looking for friends or family members. A piece of the ceiling collapsed near Laura, and she felt hot metal graze her shoulder. She kept moving. The bunker was deep underground, protected by layers of rock and reinforced steel. Laura counted heads as people stumbled through the heavy door. 31 people made it inside before she had to seal the entrance. 31 out of 73. She could hear the bombing continue above them, feel the vibrations through the floor. Each impact meant another building destroyed, another piece of their home turned to ash and rubble. Carol, the teacher, sat in the corner, holding 3 crying children. Their parents had not made it to the bunker. Danny worked frantically at a backup communications terminal, trying to send more information to Earth. An engineer named Pete examined their supplies and calculated how long they could survive underground. After 2 hours, the bombing stopped. The silence was somehow worse. Then came the ground troops. Laura watched on the security cameras as precise Valkyrie soldiers landed near the ruins of the outpost. They were tall creatures, covered in dark scales, moving with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. They carried weapons that glowed with strange energy and wore armor that made them look like demons from older stories. The aliens began searching the wreckage, looking for survivors. When they found the bunker door, they started cutting through it with tools that melted steel like butter. Laura gathered her people. She looked at their faces, saw the fear and despair in their eyes, and made a decision. They would not surrender. They would not beg. They would fight. The outpost had mining lasers, tools designed to cut through rock. They had explosives for clearing tunnels. They had 31 people who had just watched their friends die and had nothing left to lose. When the Valkyrie soldiers broke through the door, they expected to find cowering survivors ready to submit. Instead, they found humans who fought like cornered animals. The battle lasted 4 hours. The miners used their knowledge of the tunnels to set traps and ambush. They collapsed passages on enemy soldiers. They rigged explosives to trigger when the aliens passed. They fought with a fury that the Valkyrie had never seen from any species. Danny died holding a position at a tunnel junction, giving others time to retreat. Carol died protecting the children when the aliens finally reached the inner chambers. Pete died with his hands around an enemy soldier's throat, taking one more of them with him. When it was over, every human in the bunker was dead. But they had taken 64 Valkyrie soldiers with them, a number that would shock the Dominion's military command. The Valkyrie commander, Thelver, stood in the blood-soaked tunnels and looked at the bodies of his fallen troops. He had expected easy conquest. He had found something else entirely, but he felt no fear, only annoyance. These humans had caused him problems, nothing more. He ordered his fleet to return home, satisfied that his mission was complete. The mineral deposits now belonged to the Dominion. The primitive species called humanity would accept this fact and stay in their place. Before Laura died, she had recorded one final message. Danny had managed to transmit it to Earth in the chaos of the final battle. Her voice was calm and steady, even as gunfire echoed behind her. This is Commander Laura Bennett of Mining, Outpost 7. The Valkyrie Dominion has attacked us without warning or provocation. Most of my people are dead. The rest of us will follow soon. We are fighting back as best we can. Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them we did not go quietly. Tell them to remember us. The message reached Earth 12 hours later. It changed everything. Admiral Kevin Price was eating breakfast with his daughter when his phone started buzzing. He ignored it at first, enjoying the rare morning at home with his family. But the phone kept buzzing, again and again, until his wife gave him a look that told him to answer it. 5 minutes later, he was in his car, driving faster than he should toward military headquarters. His breakfast sat cold on a table. Forgotten that the United Earth Defense Council met in a room deep underground, protected by walls thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. Kevin had been in this room many times before, but he had never seen the faces around the table look so grim. President Maria Santos stood at the front of the room. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, known for her calm demeanor in any crisis. But today, even she looked shaken. "Play the recording," she said. The screens around the room came to life. They showed footage from Kepler 442b, captured by security cameras and transmitted to Earth before the outpost fell. Kevin watched in silence as Valkyrie warships filled the sky. He watched the bombing, the destruction, the chaos. He watched people running and dying. He watched the final stand in the tunnels die when Laura Bennett's last message played. The room was completely silent. Her voice, steady and brave in the face of death, echoed off the walls. "Tell them we did not go quietly." The recording ended. For a long moment, Nobody spoke. Kevin had been a military man for 30 years. He had seen combat, lost friends, made hard decisions. But watching those civilians die, watching children hide in a bunker while aliens bombed their home, filled him with a cold rage he had never felt before. President Santos turned to face the room. The Veltri ambassador has requested a meeting. He wants to explain his government's actions. She paused. I want recommendations before I speak with him. General Patricia Wells, commander of Earth's ground forces, spoke first. We need more information. We don't know why they attacked. We don't know if this is the beginning of a larger campaign or an isolated incident. With respect, General, Kevin said, I don't think the why matters much anymore. 73 of our people are dead. 14 of them were children. Whatever their reasons, the Veltri made a choice. Now we make ours. The debate continued for 2 hours. Some argued for caution, for diplomacy, for measured response. Others demanded immediate retaliation. Kevin listened to all of it, thinking about Lara Bennett and her people, about the message she had sent in her final moments. In the end, President Santos made the decision herself. Bring in the ambassador. The Veltri diplomat was tall, like all his kind, with dark green scales and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. He walked into the room with the confidence of someone who believed he was speaking to inferiors. Kevin immediately wanted to punch him in the face. President Santos, the ambassador said through his translator device, I come to explain the actions of the Dominion and to establish proper relations between our peoples. Explain, Santos said flatly. The ambassador launched into a speech about the natural order of galactic civilization. The Veltri had been expanding across space for 10,000 years. They had a right to resources wherever they found them. Lesser species were expected to accept this and stay out of the way. Humanity's outpost had been in territory the Dominion wanted, so the Dominion had taken it. This is how the galaxy works, the ambassador concluded. Your people were given warnings to leave. They refused. The consequences were unfortunate but necessary. Kevin felt his hands clench into fists. Warnings? There had been no warnings. The Veltri had simply arrived and started killing. President Santos leaned forward. Ambassador, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I want a simple answer. Does your government intend to apologize for the deaths of 73 human citizens, including 14 children? The ambassador looked confused, as if the question made no sense to him. Apologize? No. Why would we apologize for dealing with an obstacle? Your people were in our way. They are no longer in our way. The matter is settled. The room went very quiet. Santos nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. You've made our decision much easier. She turned to Kevin. Admiral, how long until we can assemble a strike fleet? Kevin did some quick calculations in his head. 48 hours for initial deployment. We can have 300 ships ready within a week. The ambassador's confident expression finally cracked. Strike fleet? You cannot be serious. The Dominion has existed for 10,000 years. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. You have been traveling between stars for less than 2 centuries. This is not a fight you can win. Kevin stood up from his chair and walked toward the alien. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough to see his own reflection in those strange eyes. Ambassador, let me explain something to you. We don't care about winning. We don't care about your 10,000 years of history. We don't care about your hundreds of conquered worlds. He pointed at the screen, still showing the frozen image of the destroyed outpost. We care about that. We care about 73 people who woke up one morning just trying to live their lives and ended up dead because your government decided they were in the way. He leaned closer. You came here thinking we would protest, maybe impose some economic sanctions, and then accept our place in your galactic order. You were wrong. We're going to come to your homeworld, Ambassador. We're going to show you what humanity does when someone hurts our people." The ambassador tried to recover his composure. "You are making a terrible mistake. The Dominion will destroy your fleet. Your species will be enslaved or exterminated." "Maybe," Kevin said, "but we're coming anyway. And we're bringing weapons your intelligence officers have never seen. Things we built hoping we would never have to use." The Prometheus Protocol. For the first time, the ambassador looked genuinely afraid. Humanity had been developing weapons in secret for decades, preparing for the day when some hostile alien species might threaten Earth. The Velthari, in their arrogance, had not bothered to spy on such a primitive civilization. "What is the Prometheus Protocol?" he asked. Kevin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You'll find out." The ambassador was escorted out of the building and told to leave Earth immediately. His ship departed that night, carrying a message back to the Dominion. The humans were coming, and they were not coming to negotiate. Within 48 hours, 300 of humanity's most powerful warships gathered in orbit around Earth. Crews said goodbye to their families. Officers reviewed battle plans. Engineers loaded weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. Captain Greg Morrison commanded the flagship, a massive carrier named Avalanche. He stood on the bridge as his ship prepared to depart, looking at Earth through the main view screen. Blue oceans, white clouds, the only home humanity had ever known. "Captain," his communications officer said, "all ships report ready." Greg took a deep breath. He thought about Laura Bennett, about her final message, about the 73 names that would soon be carved into memorial walls. "Set course for Velthari space," he ordered. "All ships, engage." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared into the darkness. Earth grew small behind them and then vanished entirely. The war had begun. The journey to Velthari space took 3 months. 3 months of traveling through empty darkness, moving faster than light toward an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. 3 months for the crews to think about what they were doing and what might happen when they arrived. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Page served as the tactical officer aboard the destroyer Reckoning. She was 32 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. Her job was to study the enemy and find ways to beat them. During the long voyage, she barely slept. Nicole had access to every piece of information humanity had gathered about the Velthari over the years. She read intelligence reports, analyzed captured technology, studied recordings of their military exercises. What she found was not encouraging. The Velthari were superior in almost every way that mattered. Their ships were faster. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons could hit targets from distances that human sensors could barely detect. On paper, the coming battle looked like suicide, but Nicole noticed something interesting hidden in all that data. The Velthari had been fighting the same way for thousands of years. Their tactics were ancient, refined over centuries, and almost perfectly efficient. They had never needed to adapt because they had never faced a serious threat. More importantly, they did not understand sacrifice. Their wars were careful, calculated affairs. They would retreat rather than take heavy losses. They would negotiate rather than risk destruction. The concept of fighting to the last person, of accepting death rather than defeat, was foreign to their military thinking. Nicole brought her analysis to Captain Greg Morrison during the second month of the voyage. They sat in his office, surrounded by star maps and tactical displays, while she explained what she had found. "They've never fought anyone like us," she said. "They've conquered species that surrendered when things looked bad. They've beaten enemies that valued survival above all else. They don't know what to do against someone who won't stop coming." Greg listened carefully. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from decades of service. He had fought in 2 previous conflicts, small skirmishes against minor alien species, and he knew what battle looked like. "So our advantage is that we're willing to die?" he asked. Nicole nodded. "Our advantage is that we're willing to do whatever it takes." "They're not." The fleet continued its journey, and word spread among the crews about what they faced. Some people grew afraid. Others grew angry. In the mess halls and corridors of 300 ships, humans talked about Kepler 442b, about the 73 dead, about what they would do when they finally reached the enemy. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Lane worked in damage control aboard the cruiser Defiance. He was 40 years old, with thick arms and a face that had been broken and healed more times than he could count. His job was to keep the ship running when things went wrong, to seal breaches and fight fires and pull wounded sailors to safety. Marcus had watched the recording from Kepler 442b 6 times. He had memorized the faces of the dead, learned their names, read about their lives in the personnel files. He kept a photo of Carol, the teacher, on his locker door, a woman he had never met who had died protecting children she loved. When other sailors asked him why he volunteered for this mission, Marcus just pointed at that photo. No other explanation was needed. The Valkyrie knew the humans were coming. Their scouts had tracked the fleet from the moment it left Earth's system. The Dominion used the 3 months to prepare their defenses and issue threats. Every day, the human fleet received messages from Valkyrie commanders. The messages warned of total destruction. They promised that humanity would be enslaved, their planets conquered, their species reduced to nothing. They demanded surrender and begged the humans to see reason. Admiral Kevin Price listened to every message. He never responded. On the 87th day of the voyage, the fleet reached the border of Valkyrie space. Ahead of them lay the first defense line, 200 enemy warships arranged in perfect formation, blocking the path to their homeworld. The Valkyrie commander sent one final message. His face appeared on every screen in the human fleet, speaking through a translation program that made his words sound flat and mechanical. "Human vessels, you have entered sovereign territory of the Valkyrie Dominion. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated with mercy. Continue forward, and you will be destroyed. This is your final warning." Admiral Price appeared on the screens next, his image replacing the alien commander's face. He looked tired, the weight of what he was about to order visible in his eyes. But his voice was steady. "All ships, this is Admiral Price. You know why we're here. You know what they did. You know what we're going to do." He paused. "Battle stations. Engage the enemy." 300 human ships surged forward. 200 Valkyrie ships opened fire. The battle was chaos. Energy weapons tore through space, leaving trails of light that burned afterimages into human eyes. Ships exploded, scattering debris and bodies across the void. The noise of combat filled every corridor, every room, every corner of every vessel in the fleet. Marcus Lane worked through the battle in a haze of smoke and screaming alarms. The Defiance took hit after hit, each impact tearing new holes in her hull. He sealed breaches with emergency patches. He dragged wounded sailors away from burning compartments. He watched friends die and kept working, because stopping meant dying too. Nicole Page called out targets from her station aboard the Reckoning, her voice steady despite the destruction around her. She watched human ships vanish from her display, one after another, and forced herself to keep focusing on the enemy. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the first Valkyrie defense line had ceased to exist. Every enemy ship was destroyed or disabled. The path to their homeworld was open, but the cost was terrible. 94 human ships were gone, broken apart or burned to nothing. Thousands of sailors were dead. The surviving vessels were damaged, some barely able to fly. limping forward through fields of wreckage. Marcus sat in a corridor of the Defiance after the shooting stopped. The deck was covered in blood and ash. His hands were burned from handling hot metal. His lungs hurt from breathing smoke. He thought about going home. He thought about telling his commanders that this was enough, that they had proven their point. That continuing forward was madness. Then he remembered Carol, the teacher, holding children in her arms while aliens burned her home. He remembered 73 names carved into his memory. He stood up and went back to work. The fleet continued toward Valkyrie Prime. They had won the first battle, but the second defense line was waiting. And this time, the enemy would be ready. The second defense line was even larger than the first. 300 Valkyrie warships waited in formation, spread across the space between the human fleet and their homeworld. Behind them, massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons powerful enough to destroy entire squadrons with a single shot. Admiral Kevin Price looked at the tactical display and felt his stomach drop. His fleet had been reduced to just over 200 ships, many of them damaged from the previous battle. The enemy ahead was fresh, well-supplied, and fighting to protect their home. A direct assault would be suicide. The human fleet would be destroyed long before they reached the planet. But Kevin had not come all this way to fight a conventional battle. He called Commander Anthony Blake to his office aboard the Avalanche. Anthony was 45 years old, with a shaved head and calm eyes that betrayed nothing. He commanded a special unit of 12 small ships that had stayed hidden at the back of the fleet throughout the journey. "It's time," Kevin said. Anthony nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come from the day he received his orders back on Earth. His unit carried the Prometheus weapons, devices so terrible that humanity had prayed they would never be used. Quantum destabilizers, they were called. Machines that could trigger chain reactions in a planet's core, tearing it apart from the inside. "My team is ready," Anthony said. "We just need a distraction." Kevin outlined the plan. The main fleet would engage the Valkyrie defense line, drawing their attention and their fire. While the enemy focused on the larger battle, Anthony's 12 ships would slip through the chaos and position themselves around Valkyrie Prime. "You understand what we're asking you to do," Kevin said. It was not a question. Anthony met his eyes. "I watched the recording from Kepler 442b. I saw what they did to those people. I understand exactly what I'm doing." He left to prepare his team. Kevin watched him go and wondered if history would remember them as heroes or monsters. The battle began at dawn, measured by ship time. The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, throwing everything they had at the enemy line. It was not a fight they could win, and everyone knew it. They just needed to hold the enemy's attention long enough. The Valkyrie commander was confident at first. His forces were superior, his position was strong, and the humans seemed to be repeating their previous tactics. He ordered his ships to engage and destroy the attackers, expecting victory within hours. He did not notice the 12 small vessels that slipped away from the main battle. Anthony Blake flew at the front of his formation, guiding his team through asteroid fields and debris clouds to avoid detection. His ship was called the Shadow, a name that seemed appropriate for what they were about to do. The journey through enemy space took 4 hours. They lost 4 ships to patrols and defensive satellites, their crews dying without a sound to avoid alerting the enemy. 8 ships remained when they finally reached their designated positions around Valkyrie Prime. Anthony looked at the planet through his viewport. It was beautiful in its way. Blue-green oceans covered most of the surface. Cities sparkled on the night side, lights from billions of lives going about their daily business. The Valkyrie had built their civilization here over 10,000 years. He was about to end it. The Prometheus weapons were simple in principle, terrifying in effect. Each device would create a quantum instability deep within the planet's core. The instabilities would spread, disrupting the geological forces that held the world together. Within days, Valkyrie Prime would tear itself apart. "All ships, report status," Anthony said into his communication system. 7 voices responded. All devices were ready. All crews were prepared. "Begin countdown," he ordered. Back at the main battle, things had gone from bad to worse for the human fleet. 50 more ships had been destroyed, and the survivors were barely holding on. But they had done their job. The enemy was focused entirely on them, oblivious to the threat already in position around their homeworld. Then the Valkyrie commander received a message from his government. Quantum signatures had been detected around the planet. Something was happening that their scientists did not understand. Commander pulled up a sensor display and saw the 8 human vessels arranged in a precise pattern around Valkyrie Prime. Each vessel was emitting strange energy readings, building towards something his instruments could not identify. Fear, real fear, flooded through him for the first time. He opened a channel to the human fleet. "What are you doing? What is this?" Admiral Price appeared on his screen. The human looked exhausted, his uniform stained with smoke and sweat from hours of combat. But there was something terrible in his eyes, a cold resolve that made the Valkyrie commander's scales crawl. "This is humanity's response to Kepler 442b, Price said. "You killed 73 of our people to teach us our place in the galaxy. Now we're going to teach you something." "You cannot do this," the commander said. "There are 5 billion people on that planet. Civilians, children. You would murder them all?" Price's expression did not change. "Your people murdered our children first. You broadcast it as a demonstration of power. You sent your ambassador to tell us it was the natural order of things." He leaned forward. "We learned from you. We learned that the galaxy only respects one thing: the willingness to do what others won't." The Valkyrie government began sending frantic messages. They offered immediate surrender. They promised reparations, territory, whatever the humans wanted. They begged for mercy. Price listened to all of it. Then he shook his head. Too late. He turned to his communications officer. "Signal Commander Blake. Execute Prometheus." Anthony Blake received the order aboard the Shadow. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his wife back on Earth, about the children he would never have, about the world he was about to destroy. Then he thought about Mara Bennett, standing in a burning bunker, recording her final message while aliens killed everyone she loved. "All ships," he said, "activate devices." 8 quantum destabilizers fired simultaneously. The energy beams lanced into Valkyrie Prime's core, triggering cascading reactions that no technology could stop. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The planet hung in space, beautiful and seemingly untouched. Then the earthquakes began. Thalver, the commander who had ordered the attack on Kepler 442b, was on his ship in orbit when the first reports came in. Cities were shaking. Volcanoes were erupting in places that had been dormant for millions of years. The ground itself was splitting open. He had expected glory from his attack on the human outpost. He had expected promotion and honor for teaching those primitives their place. Instead, he watched his homeworld begin to die. The human fleet withdrew from the battle. There was no need to continue fighting. The Valkyrie ships scattered in confusion, some racing toward the planet in a desperate attempt to evacuate survivors, others simply fleeing into deep space. Admiral Price watched it all from the bridge of the avalanche. He had given the order. He had ended a world. He would carry that weight for the rest of his life. But he thought of 73 people who had died on a forgotten mining outpost, and he knew he would give the same order again. Valkyrie Prime died slowly. The quantum destabilizers had done their work well, triggering chain reactions deep in the planet's core that no force in the universe could stop. Over the following days, Humanity and the rest of the galaxy watched as an ancient world tore itself apart. The first day was the worst. Earthquakes shattered cities that had stood for thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions split continents in half, sending rivers of fire through streets where billions of people lived. The atmosphere filled with ash and poison, blocking out the sun and turning day into eternal night. 3 billion Velthari died in those first 24 hours. They died in collapsing buildings and burning homes. They died running through streets that opened beneath their feet. They died reaching for loved ones they would never see again. The survivors fled to anything that could fly. Colony ships, cargo vessels, personal shuttles, anything with an engine launched into space carrying desperate refugees. Orbital stations filled beyond capacity. Ships designed for hundreds carried thousands, but there was nowhere to go. Velthari Prime had been the heart of the Dominion, the center of their civilization. The colony worlds were not prepared for billions of refugees. The infrastructure simply did not exist. Another 2 billion died over the following week. Some died in overcrowded ships when life support failed. Some died on colonies that could not feed them. Some died by their own choice. Unable to face a universe without their home, the galaxy watched all of this. With horror, every spacefaring species had sensors pointed at Velthari Prime. They saw the destruction in real time, transmitted across thousands of light years by news, networks that had never imagined they would broadcast the death of a world. And they understood the message humanity was sending. Attack our people, and we will end yours. Not through war or occupation or slow decline, but through complete annihilation. There would be no negotiation, no proportional response, no second chances. Cross this line, and your civilization ends. Captain Greg Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Avalanche as Velthari Prime burned. The planet's surface glowed red through cracks in its crust, like a dying ember in the darkness of space. Clouds of debris spread outward, the remains of mountains and cities and everything the Velthari had built over 10,000 years. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Page joined him there. She had helped plan this mission, had identified the weaknesses they exploited, and contributed to the strategy that brought them here. But watching the results of that planning was different from imagining it. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Greg thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the 73 people who had died on Kepler-4, 42b. He thought about Laura Bennett's final message, her voice steady as death closed in around her. He thought about Carol, the teacher, holding children while aliens destroyed her world. Then he thought about the billions of Velthari who had nothing to do with any of that. Parents who had been cooking dinner when the earthquake started. Children who had been playing games they would never finish. People who had simply been living their lives, unaware that their government's arrogance had doomed them all. I don't know, Greg admitted. But I know this. No one will ever attack a human outpost again. Every species in the galaxy just learned what happens if they try. He was right. The human fleet returned home to a complicated welcome. Crowds gathered to cheer for them, waving flags and signs celebrating their victory. But there were also protests, people who believed that humanity had become monsters, that destroying a world could never be justified. Admiral Kevin Price became the most famous and most controversial figure in human history. Some called him a hero who had protected humanity. Others called him a war criminal who had committed genocide. He attended ceremonies and gave speeches and accepted medals, but he never smiled. The weight of his decision showed in every line on his face. He spent the rest of his life advocating for peace. He pushed for diplomatic solutions, for understanding between species, for anything that might prevent another Velthari Prime. Some people thought he was trying to make up for what he had done. Others thought he genuinely believed that humanity should never use the Prometheus weapons again. Maybe both things were true. the Velthari remnants scattered across the galaxy. They settled on colony worlds and space stations, always looking over their shoulders, always waiting for the humans to come back and finish what they started. They told their children stories about the homeworld they had lost, about the great civilization that had been destroyed in a matter of days. They became a warning to every other species. This is what happens when you underestimate the humans. This is what happens when you hurt their people. Centuries passed. Humanity expanded across the galaxy, building colonies on thousands of worlds. Other species gave them wide berth, treating human space as territory to avoid. Diplomatic meetings with humans were conducted with extreme care, every word chosen to prevent offense. The Prometheus weapons were never used again. They sat in secure bunkers on hidden military bases, maintained by crews who hoped they would never receive deployment orders. But everyone knew they existed. Everyone remembered what humanity was capable of. On the anniversary of the attack on Kepler 442b, humans across the galaxy observed a moment of silence. They lit candles and said prayers and remembered 73 people who had died on a forgotten mining outpost. Schools taught children about Laura Bennett and her final message. Memorials listed every name, every face, every life cut short by alien arrogance. But the anniversaries also remembered. Velthari Prime. Some humans mourned for the billions who had died in retaliation, innocent people killed to send a message. Others felt nothing but grim satisfaction, believing that the price of peace was worth paying. Nicole Page retired from the military and became a teacher. She spent her final years telling young officers of the battle for Velthari Prime, about the decisions that led to it, about the consequences that followed. She never told them whether she thought it was right or wrong. She just wanted them to understand. Marcus Lane went back to his family after the war. He never spoke about what he had seen or what he had done. When his grandchildren asked about his medals, he just smiled and changed the subject. The photo of Carol, the teacher, stayed in his wallet until the day he died. Commander Anthony Blake received no medals and no recognition. His mission was classified, his name erased from official records. He lived quietly on a small colony world, growing vegetables and watching the stars. Sometimes he dreamed about Velthari Prime, about the moment he gave the order, about the world dying beneath him. He never regretted his decision, but he never stopped thinking about it either. The galaxy eventually settled into an uneasy peace. Species traded and cooperated and occasionally disagreed, but nobody wanted to risk another extinction-level conflict. Humanity sat at the center of this new order, respected and feared in equal measure. They had survived. They had won. They had ensured their place among the stars. But sometimes, in quiet moments, humans wondered what they had lost along the way. They wondered if they had become the monsters they once feared. They wondered if the price of survival was worth their humanity. Lavra Bennett's final words were carved into memorials on 1,000 worlds, spoken by children who would never know her, remembered by a species that had transformed itself to avenge her. Tell them we did not go quietly. They had not gone quietly, and neither had the Velthari. The universe would remember both.